Peoples, good afternoon. It is Friday, February 16th, and I am here with your geopolitical news. Al Jazeera reports the impact of anti Arab and anti Muslim sentiment in the U.S. Following an inflammatory piece in the Wall Street Journal, Mark Lamont Hill talks to Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud.
Since the October 7th attacks and the war on Gaza, there has been a rise in anti Muslim and anti Arab incidents affecting communities and citizens across the United States. One of those affected communities resides in the city of Dearborn, Michigan, home to one of the largest populations of Arab Americans per capita in the country. You may have seen Dearborn in the headlines recently after an opinion piece was published in the Wall Street Journal, which labeled the city as, quote, America's Jihad Capital.
Now, America's jihad capital seems to be another stereotype. You know, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab. You know, for a country that opens or keeps its borders open to anyone that wants to come to this country and seeking asylum in this country, it's very appalling for there to be anti anything, anti anyone. This country is full of migrants that come from all walks of life, from all parts of the planet Earth. And so to be anti anyone, to be anti anything is it's inappropriate. It's grotesquely inappropriate. Because if you know anything about the United States of America, it's a gumbo. It's a gumbo of so many people, so many nationalities, so many ethnic groups from all around the world. So it is very inappropriate to be anti anything.
Many have pointed out that this is yet another sign of the rising tide of Islamophobia. Meanwhile, many in the Muslim and Arab communities across the United States have expressed their outrage at the Biden administration for its support of Israel's deadly onslaught in Gaza. So, what impact has Israel's war on Gaza had on Muslim and Arab communities in the U.S.? And how will it affect the upcoming presidential election? Here to speak with us is Dearborn's first Muslim and first Arab American mayor, Abdullah Hammoud. Mayor Hammoud, thanks so much for joining us on Upfront.
Now, I had no idea that not only was this individual the mayor, but I had no idea that he was Muslim. And so when you ask a question like, what effect does it have? Especially because of the presidential elections this year. Well, I would say it has a very negative effect on the presidential election. You know, at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and say that it is it is not professional advice. It is not advice to you. And I do not advise that you do as I do. But I am not voting as I have never voted. Now, what I will say is that I am a registered voter. So I am registered to vote. And, you know, I had discussions with my wife about this topic. And I believe that it will come to an inflection point in this country where if you are a registered voter, then they will demand that you come and vote. This is just what I believe. Now, if it falls in line with conspiracy theory talk, then, you know, this is the Street Icon Podcast Conspiracy Theory Series. So it falls in line. But I do believe that we will come to a point in American society where certain things will be mandatory. They will be mandated. And I believe that that is one of them. So right now I am exercising my right as an American citizen to not to not vote, even though I have the ability to vote. But what is the point of voting when there is no one that has your morals, principles, and values that they're upholding for you to vote for? You see, this is the problem with the whole process. This is the problem with democracy. And that's a whole nother topic, whether it is better to be under a democracy or whether it is better to be under a dictatorship. That's a whole nother conversation. But what you see in this country year after year, as history repeats itself, what you get is a country that is divided. So it is almost unequivocal that at least half the country, if you want to call it half or whatever the the percentages are for whoever is in agreement for who they voted for that's in a position of power. What I am meaning to say is that the United States of America is always divided. Because of our policy of democracy, it is always divided, and half the country is always um unhappy, always unsatisfied. And it is because the person that you voted for or the person that you would have liked to be sitting in a position of power is not. And so, what do you do in that circumstance? With a person that you have voted for didn't win the election. So now the other individual has won the election, and these are policies and things that you just do not believe in. They are enacting and enforcing policies and creating laws that you just don't agree with. So there will never be a time where the country of the United States of America will be unified as a whole. Let me repeat that. Because if for those of you that are intellectuals, for those of you that are chess players, for those of you that like to play intellectual games or like to challenge your mind, I challenge you to this. At what point in American history, past, present, and future, will there ever be a time where the whole country, 100%, is united? When will there ever be a time? Now, many of you will say, you know what? That's that's not a good argument. That's not a good example because there's no place on planet Earth that will be fully united. Well, I beg to differ. I beg to differ. And so that is my question to you. At what point in time will we ever be fully united under this construct of democracy?
Much for having me. In the 3 months following October 7th, the Council on American Islamic Relations saw a 178% increase in complaints of anti Muslim and anti Palestinian incidents around the United States. Now, you were raised in Dearborn, you're Arab American, you're Muslim. Have you experienced this rise? Have you seen what people are talking about? Absolutely. You know, immediately following the events of October 7th, there was an individual in the state of Michigan who said he wanted to come to Dearborn to quote unquote hunt Palestinians.
And now this is the mayor of Dearborn, and he is a Muslim. And so, how is he supposed to feel? Not only as an American system, excuse me, as an American citizen, but as a Muslim. How is he supposed to feel? And he's also a individual that's in a position of power. Now, how is he also supposed to feel about the very government that he works for? The very government that are his colleagues. How is he supposed to feel about them being in support of the genocidal acts that's being committed in the Gaza Strip? How is he supposed to feel? In other geopolitical news, I'm on a YouTube platform on Al Jazeera English channel, and Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah gives Gaza speech. And so we're going to get into a little bit of this speech. Obviously, I'm not going to play the whole speech for you guys, but I'm going to play some parts of it so we can give a breakdown and an honest take on what the Hezbollah leader is saying.
Who were murdered at the hand of the Zionists, including journalists. I start by offering my deepest condolences to the families of the fallen here in Lebanon. We offer our condolences and at the same time congratulate you as your loved ones have won this honor, the honor of martyrdom. Many of you have lost loved ones, a father, a brother, or a son. And I pray to God Almighty to accept all our good deeds. We offer condolences and congratulations at the same time to all the families of the fallen martyrs in Gaza Strip, West Bank, and on every inch where our brave martyrs have fallen, including those of Al-Aqsa Typhoon or Al-Aqsa floods that has extended on a number of fighting fronts. I will not delve much on this as we will celebrate the Martyrs' Day in a few days' time. However, I must reiterate that those fallen martyrs have won, and it is sufficient to go to our holy scripture, the Quran, to read what God Almighty said about them. And we are entitled to take pride in them. And we must remain firmly with certainty that they are rewarded with paradise, with all.
I want you to understand what the Hezbollah leader just said. It is nothing wrong with taking pride in honoring the dead, no matter how they are viewed by the world. If you know someone and you know them through and through, you know their heart, you know their pain, you know their struggles, you know their sacrifices, then there's no one that can lead you to believe something different when it comes to this individual or these individuals. And so the Hezbollah leader is basically saying that for those that have died, you understand? For those that have died, whether it be the civilians or whether it be those that were fighting, regardless of how you view them and how you see them, it is very well respectful for you to honor them. because they did nothing wrong. In this situation, there's a lot of viewpoints that's being made all around the world. You know, I just watched the video of what looks to be some Orthodox Jews being assaulted by the Israeli military. And this was happening in Jerusalem. And when I watched that video, I became very enraged because, as I've told many of you before, this issue is not a Muslim Jewish issue. I know many of you would love to believe that that's what it is, but it actually isn't. There's a selective few that are of pure evil, and that's what it's always been, and that's what it always will be. Muslims and Jews have lived amongst each other in peace for not just centuries but thousands of years, and they still do to this day. There are Muslims and Jews that are best friends that still, throughout this tragedy and this horrific situation that's unfolding, some of these Muslims and Jews have even grown closer to each other because they view themselves as the true believers. And their friendship and their honor and the way that they treat each other is a testament to them being the true believers. And so I don't get sidetracked when I'm reporting these stories. I've never made blanket statements against all of Israel and all of Jewish people because that emphatically makes no sense. I am more intelligent than that. And I know in my heart that there are Jews who not only stand against what's happening in the Gaza Strip right now, but no, there are Jews that are willing to fight and will lay down their life to protect Muslims, Arabs, and anyone alike. You see, there's some of us on this planet that absolutely do not care. We just don't care about race and religion and nationality and all of these different things. For some of us, there's no barriers. Right is right, wrong is wrong. It's kind of just that simple. And so it's easy to come in and navigate and judge situations based off of just that, based off of just right and wrong. Nothing else. No additives, nothing else included. And so I wanted to make it very clear that this is not a Jewish or a Muslim problem. This is a evil versus good problem.
The rewards you never envisaged, heard, or heard of. As God says in the Holy Scripture, those killed in the cause to the service of the cause of God will be rewarded with paradise as introduced to them. Oh, believers, if you support and work for God's cause, you will be rewarded with victory. The same.
If you support and work for God's cause, you will be rewarded with victory. You will be rewarded with paradise in the hereafter. So to fight in a cause of God, to fight in a cause for humanity is a just and a righteous thing to do, and you will be rewarded. You see, your reward is not here in this life. Your reward is in the afterlife. So for fighting for justice, freedom, and equality, you may very well be detained and imprisoned on this planet. So I want you to understand and know the difference, because just because you are detained and imprisoned on planet Earth does not mean you will not touch paradise in the hereafter. If you truly believe that you are going to paradise, if you truly believe that you are a believer, then you know that that is your destination. And so for those that are fighting for this cause, for those that are fighting and believing in God first and upholding righteousness from God first. I always said this, and I said this in a previous segment. God's law and man's law is something that you're going to have to decide which one you're willing to choose and which one you're willing to uphold. Because as I said just now, upholding God's law might have you detained and imprisoned on this planet. You might very well be serving the rest of your life in somebody's prison for upholding God's law on this planet. And you have to understand and know that the punishment that you feel like you're receiving is not a punishment at all. It's not punishment. If you've done something righteously and you are detained or imprisoned for it, then what punishment is there? There is no punishment. Man's law means nothing because this is only a construct. And when you and I perish, this construct will be over and we will be returned to our higher power. So it is your choice of what you choose to do with your life on this planet.
In Al Imran Surah, do not think those fallen to the service of cause of God are dead, yet they are alive, joyful with what they have been rewarded with, without fear or grief, abiding in God's blessings that their good deeds were not wasted. So our fallen martyrs are not dead. They are alive, not in the judgment day where all the human beings will be resurrected. No, those fallen martyrs are now alive in God's paradise. Do not think they are dead. They are alive, but you feel not them. We congratulate all the fallen martyrs, the fighters, the civilians, the aggrieved, women, men, children, old and young. We congratulate them for this massive transition at the presence of God, paradise where there is no Israeli oppression or American hubris, no killing, no massacres, no pogroms. And from this firm conviction, we congratulate them. And to their families, we say, your loved ones have fallen in a battle on the face of the earth. And if we are to look for a fully legitimate, lawful battle from the legal, ethical, or religious perspectives, we cannot find one, but that battle fighting against the Zionist occupiers. This is a seamless battle at the human, ethical, or religious levels. It is the most evident, the most honest, and the most noble to the service of the cause of God. This what must be established in the first place. We also say to the relatives of the fallen martyrs, we are proud of you. We take all pride in you. We have heard your statements of acceptance, submission for the fall of your loved ones. And here lies our true strength before the arms. Our true strength lies in our firm belief, unshaken conviction, our devotion and commitment to the cause. We are prepared to sacrifice. It is expressed in the voices of the fathers, mothers, wives, and children of the fallen martyrs. Equally enough, we salute the epic people, unmatched, unrivaled, the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza. We have seen them on TV screens. Man, woman, child, baby, crawling from underneath the rubble. Yet he cries out saying, all what is lost is to sacrifice for the sake of our homeland, for the sake of our cause. We cannot put this into words. We cannot express their fortitude, bravery, patience, and resolve.
What they also won't be able to express is their hurt and their pain and their anger. And there's truly only one way to express these things. You know, action is what's needed when it comes to situations like this. And so, how can you not be proud of the freedom fighters, such as the Houthi rebels, Hezbollah, Hamas, and other organizations that are out there that are fighting? See, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels are not the only um, freedom fighters that are out there that are fighting against what's going on in Palestine and the Gaza Strip. You know, there's other freedom fighters, there's other groups that are fighting as well. And so, like I said previously, sometimes you have to make a judgment. You have to do something and stand on the side of righteousness. But as I said before, the key is knowing that on this planet and in this construct that we live in, that fight may very well go punished on this planet. You'll be rewarded graciously beyond your belief and my belief in the afterlife. But as it relates to this planet, you may very well be in a very bad predicament for that fight that you're fighting. But nonetheless, you have to decide whether it's worth fighting for. And so for those that have decided that it is absolutely worth fighting, for those that have decided that it is without question that there will be a fight, well, these are the ones that are to be celebrated. These are the ones that are to be exalted. These are the ones that are to be remembered.
The same applies to the residents of West Bank. Patience, fortitude, and resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, today I will address you on the main topic in order to understand what happened and to make clear of our position and also identify the liabilities. and taking into consideration the Lebanese affairs, which will require further details at a later point of time. At the beginning, we must also salute all those who took to the street in support and in solidarity with the Palestinians from all over the world, Arab and Muslim and Latin American countries, the peoples of different nations, specifically the strong and brave Iraqi and Yemeni arms who are now involved in this holy war. Why have we reached that point, and what is the backdrop of what happened in October 7, Al-Aqsa Typhoon operation? I will address bullet points in brief. It must be mentioned in order to build up our stand. The pain and suffering of the Palestinian people is not a secret to the whole.
And I take note of the fact that he is referring to October 7th as a mission, a mission that was carried out by freedom fighters. And I keep reverting you back to the ceasefire or the brief pause that was made where there were hostages that were exchanged. And I posed the question of, where did Israel get hostages to even exchange? I posed that question, and maybe that has went over many of your heads. But women and children were released by Israel, and no one asked the question as it relates to how these women and children, why they were detained, how they were detained, and what was the whole nature of them being detained in Israel. No one asked these questions. No one wanted to know why Israel was holding women and children. No one wanted to know this. But these women and children were detained inside of Israel and were being held without any charges and hadn't seen their loved ones or family members for weeks, months, and some for even years. So this is a question that needs to be asked, because my intellect tells me that this mission that was carried out on October 7th was a mission that was in retaliation for the kidnapping of so many civilians in Palestine. I believe this to be true.
World, and there is no point to delve in this. Yet, the recent years were harsh, especially with this radical, stupid, and brutal government of Israel. There are four main headlines on the Palestinian landscape. The first is the Palestinian detainees. Thousands of Palestinian men and women and even children are held behind Israeli bars, some for years. Many are on the verge of death, and no one is moving a finger. And with this radical government, this stupid minister made the lives of the detainees and their families even worse. The second issue is Al-Quds, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and what has been happening in the past weeks, namely the few days before Al-Aqsa Typhoon. These conditions were unprecedented since the occupation of Jerusalem in 1967. Third, the unjust siege laid to Gaza for more than 20 years, almost 20 years. More than 2 million people living in an open concentration camp without any person moving a finger in the whole world. The fourth one is the recent perils and risks hovering on the West Bank through the expansive illegal Israeli settlement under the auspices of this stupid fool government, in addition to the daily detention and demolition of homes. These are the key four headlines that have impacted the Palestinian and the Palestinian resistance. And no one in the whole world is moving a finger. The United Nations, Security Council, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, League of Arab States, European Union, none of the international blocs or organizations. On the contrary, the
And that should be pointed out that none of these nations, including the nation of our very own, not only have they not stood up for Palestine or stood up for a ceasefire, but they've actually instigated, encouraged, have aided, and funded this horrific situation.
Palestinian cause and all what is happening in Palestine were totally forgotten. The whole world turned a blind eye to them. Totally abandoned, totally forgotten.
I like to say that it's not the whole world, my brother, but sadly, it is those that are in positions of power. And, you know, there was a statement by Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, where he charged all of Palestinians for not stopping Hamas on October 7th. You know, it's almost as if it's okay to say that a people of a certain nation or a certain country should uprise and overthrow their government when that government doesn't fit your narrative, your agenda, your policies. It's okay to say these things. But if they had said such a thing as it relates to the United States or to Israel or to Europe or to Germany or to any of these places, if it is said that if your government is not doing what you, the people, wish for them to do, if they're totally moving against the direction that the people of the general population want them to move, then they could very well charge us with the same thing. I could very well be looked at as someone who is aiding and abetting, condoning. I can be someone who is looked at as being a partner of, because it is my tax paying dollars that are paying for these wars and these conflicts and these aid packages. It is my tax paying dollars that are paying for these things. So is it fair for those of other nations, for those nations that are being oppressed, that are being occupied? Is it fair for them to charge us with being complicit in the actions of our government and our military based off of the statements of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel, I would say that that's a very plausible statement. I would say that that's it's more than accurate.
In contrast, the policies of the enemy are more ferocious, oppressive, humiliating. Therefore, there must be a big event to shake this oppressive, occupying, usurping Zionist regime with their backers in Washington and London, and to reopen these humanitarian issues before the eyes of the whole world, and to resurface the Palestinian cause, the just cause, as the focal cause to the whole world. Then came that glorious jihadi operation of October 7th, Al Aqsa Typhoon. The operation was triggered by the fighters of Izzuddin al-Qassam, supported by the fighters of other Palestinian resistance factions in Gaza Strip. This operation, so this is the first point in the backdrop of the event. This glorious, blessed, large-scale operation.
And notice that he's calling it a glorious operation because indeed the operation was successful. It was successful by all means of a military operation, a military campaign. It was by all means successful by a group that is considered to be frivolous, by a group that is considered to be, they would love to use words that to downplay the group that is called Hamas, the freedom fighters of Palestine that are called Hamas. They love to use words that downplay this group and this organization. And so they they always downplay them to us. So this group is not as big as Hezbollah. They don't have the weaponry that Hezbollah has. They don't have this. They don't have that. They always downplay the group, the freedom fighters that is known as Hamas. And I find that interesting because your military campaign in the Gaza Strip outside of your bombardment is a complete failure. And so October 7th was a victory in all rights of the word victory. It was a successful mission that was carried out. It was perfectly carried out. It was perfectly planned. It was perfectly engineered. And the only thing that the Israeli government and the Israeli military could do is respond. Their response was clear of the scarce and petrified nature of all of the Israeli military and government. They were completely caught off guard and they were petrified. And so when you're caught off guard and you're petrified, you're scared, you're so fearful, then what do? You effectively start pushing buttons. You start pushing buttons and these buttons release things that can cause catastrophic damage, catastrophic events. And because you're so scared, because you're so petrified, because you're so fearful, you push those buttons. And this is your only real response because troops on the ground and actually going in and fighting hand-to-hand combat, this is something that is this is this is ancient to you and your regime. It doesn't exist anymore. You've absolutely forgotten how to do such a thing. And you probably were never really good at it to begin with. And so you'll see nations that are never that are not good at fighting, that have never really been good at fighting. You see these nations evolve with the most technology because they're looking and trying to find ways to not have human casualties, to not have soldiers die because they're so scared. They don't want to fight, but yet they want to do all the fighting. Make that make sense. You don't want to actually fight, but you want to do all the fighting. That's a oxymoron statement because you can't make that make sense. But like I just said, this is the diabolical nature of the United States of America and its Western allies.
Was 100% Palestinian in terms of decision and execution. 100% Palestinian. Even the Palestinians have kept it secret, even from their fellow Palestinian resistance factions in Gaza, let alone other resistance factions across the resistance axis. That element of secrecy was a linchpin to this emphatic success of the operation. It came as a surprise, shocking surprise, unlike what is assumed by many.
And so what he's basically saying is previously he made a statement and the world took it as, oh, he's backing out of the situation because he's saying that, well, they didn't even know that Hamas was planning an attack on October 7th. They had no knowledge or clue of it. And in this statement, he is basically saying that reason, the reason of them not knowing, is essentially the reason why the operation was successful, is because no one knew. No one knew what they were planning, not even fellow Palestinians that were inside Palestine, other resistance groups. They didn't let anyone know. So it's only a chosen few that actually knew about this mission and knew that they were going to carry this mission out. And so the rest of the Arab world were totally shocked. Even those who would have probably loved to be a part of the mission, those who probably felt like they were cheated out of receiving the credit for being a part of it. But yet and still, it was kept a secret. And he is explaining to you that that is the reason and the only reason why it probably was successful, because they understood the mission and they knew that it had to be carried out, and the only way that it can successfully be carried out is to keep it a secret. Because if that secret had gotten out, then the Israeli military, the Israeli government, they would have been on guard. They would have been ready. They would have gotten this news way ahead of time, and they would have already put provisions in place so that the operation would have failed. If it would have been carried out, it would have been a failure of giant proportions. And so it was kept a secret. And as I said, and as he is clearly stating in this speech, it was because of that reason that this was successful.
Namely those who would like to drive a wedge among us, unlike to what's been assumed by many. That type of confidentiality and secrecy adopted by Al-Qassam did not anger us here. It was a requirement for the success of the operation. And this operation has no bearing on any decision or move to be taken by any other faction along the resistance axis. This move taken by Hamas have stamped the true identity of the battle and also precluded all the enemies and hypocrites to claim to raise any false claims, especially when they speak about the relations between the resistance, regional resistance factions. At any point of time when there is a battle, they start to speak about the Iranian nuclear program.
Now, this is very key what he's saying right here because he's making a point. He's making a point to say that they love to group all of the resistance groups together when they essentially are not, even though they are together as brothers and sisters in spirit, and they will fight with each other. They don't all move on the same accord when it comes to planning and being strategic as it relates to their region and doing certain things. All of these things are not planned together, but the Western news media outlets love to paint that picture. This is what they tell us. When something happens in said region, they love to connect dots. They love to connect dots that don't even exist and they're not even there. So they keep calling these groups Iran backed militia groups. They keep using words and terminology like Iran backing. And they keep feeding this and feeding this and feeding this to you in the media. And so when you hear about any resistance in a region in the Middle East, if it's against the United States of America and its Western allies' policies, they will call it or they will attach it to another larger entity as to say, this is a part of this. And they knew that this was going to happen when it's absolutely untrue. Now, as this man has said before, and he's repeated it previously, Hezbollah and Lebanon had no idea what Hamas was going to do. Just like there were militia groups inside of Palestine, freedom fighters, that did not know what Hamas was going to do. So to make a blanket statement and to say that when this happened, this group is a Iran-backed militia group, you're making a blanket statement and you're trying to connect dots that don't even exist. And then you're also creating problems for Iran because you're involving them in something that they were never involved with to begin with. And so it's almost like blaming somebody or charging someone with a crime that they never committed. How fair and how just can that possibly be? Now, you knew that ultimately, because this is a chess game to most of these generals and these politicians and these people who sit in positions of power and play these war games and act out these war games in real life. These are these are games to them. This it's nothing different from a chess game. And so you're planning moves and strategically planning what your enemy will do, and you're pushing your enemy into corners and creating problems, and you're doing so much. You're doing so much. And so by painting to the rest of the world, firstly, that this group was an Iran-backed militia group, that was your first target, is to paint, is to spread propaganda throughout the world that Iran is backing this horrific tragedy that happened on October 7th, as you would call it. And so that was your first plan, to spread the propaganda. Then secondly, because of your military campaign inside the Gaza Strip, you knew you knew that the death and destruction would cause and would trigger Hezbollah and Iran to act. You knew this because they're Muslims. And you very well know that attacking one Muslim anywhere on planet Earth is a problem. You know this. You know this through and through because your scholars and Your scientists and people alike have very well um, went through the Quran front to back, and I'm pretty sure you have a very well understanding of the consequences of doing such a thing. And if these people who believe in Islam, if they say that they are true believers, then you know or you knew that they must act. You knew they had to act. And so it's a chess move. If you attack a group of people, then you know the other groups of people in this region or said region, you know they have to act. It is against their their religion, it is against their faith not to act, let alone human rights. It is against their belief. And so this conflict, I said from the beginning, would escalate. I knew it was going to escalate because I knew that the players involved would not stop. I knew they wouldn't stop.
The US Iran negotiations to serve the Iranian interests or agenda in the region. False claims. Yet, Al Aqsa Typhoon was 100% Palestinian in terms of decision and execution. The secrecy in which the entire operation was shrouded proves that it is a totally Palestinian cause for the sake of Palestine and the people of Palestine, and it has no relation at all to any international or regional issue. This operation also proves what we have been reiterating over the past years. Let the foe and friend understand. Let it be understood by all enemies and friends that the decisions of the resistance factions is in the hands of their own leader. Since the Iranian Revolution, from Khomeini to Khamenei, have always been openly adopting and supporting resistance factions in Lebanon, Palestine, and in the region. However, they do not exercise any form of authority or mandate on these factions or in their command.
So understand that support and authority is two totally different things. Just because you support something does not mean you have authority over it. Does not mean that you get to dictate the movements of any of these groups. And this is what the Hezbollah leader is pointing out. Just because we support these groups does not mean that we dictate or control the actions or the movements of any of these said groups. These groups move on their own accord as they see fit in the regions that they're in. In the places that they're in, they are leaders for reasons. There are people that's appointed to lead these people all over the world. So what he's basically saying is to make a charge as to make it seem like Iran is responsible. Iran is behind it. Iran is and somehow giving more support than just in spirit, because that's what it is. They're going to support their brothers and sisters in spirit. That will never die. It will never stop. As I am supporting them in spirit, that will never die. You can never break that. It is unbreakable. It is unchangeable. It is unmatched. There is no weapon against it. There's nothing that you can use that will change that. There's no separation. There's no detainment or imprisonment. There's nothing. And it doesn't change in death. This bond and this support only grows stronger. It only grows stronger. And so for you to think that you're able to stop it, for you to think that you're able to change it, for you to think that they're supposed to condemn each other for uprising against what they very well know is occupation, oppression, colonialism, all of these different things. But yet and still, you enforce them as if people are supposed to accept them. You enforce these things as if people are supposed to not have support for those who fight against them. It makes no sense. And so, what he is clearly given a distinction of, and that's why I'm doing a reaction video to this, because some of you, these words will go over your head. He is saying that they support all groups. They do support them, but they don't dictate or control them. So there is a separation. Understand that and know that. So that when you watch the news media from the Western news media outlets, you're not you're not persuaded, or you're not disillusioned to the information that you hear. So you'll have their perspective, you'll have my perspective, and so many other perspectives. And then you can decide with your intellect and your brain power what makes sense.
And what happened with the Al-Aqsa typhoon proves this fact. And those who are willing to interpret what is taking place today and what's going to take place in the future, that the true decision makers are the leaders of the resistance themselves to the service of their top and true cause. Ladies and gentlemen, the third issue I would like to speak about the repercussions of this event. What's been happening on the battlefield, I believe you are all closely following. No doubt, it was a brave, heroic, creative, perfect, massive operation, commended at all fronts and at all levels. What are the repercussions of this glorious operation? It caused a seismic shake, an earthquake in terms of security, military, politics, diplomatic, even psychological. It has very profound strategic, existential repercussions that will continue to have bearing on the presence of this Zionist entity and its future. No matter what the enemy's government has done over the past days, and no matter what they will do over the coming days, cannot change the impacts and repercussions of Al-Aqsa typhoon. Strategic.
Understand this and understand this perfectly clearly. And this is, I made a Twitter post about this, and I'm going to put that up as well. The only, the only, the only way at this point, at this point, at this date and this time that we in presently, the only way that there can be any reconciliation is through death. You you need to know this. This has to be understood. There will never be a time from this point moving forward that there will be peace between Israel and this region. There will always be a problem moving forward. This will not end. This will continue. The death, the destruction, it is far beyond way, way far beyond any reconciliation. The word reconciliation, as it relates to this situation, is inappropriate. You need to know this, because if you don't know that, then you don't understand. If you can't bring yourself to a place of understanding that the only reconciliation between Palestine and Israel will be death, it will be through death. If you don't understand that fact right there, then you're totally lost. Time is a construct. Let me repeat that. Time is a construct. I said in the statement that the only thing that will happen is that the Palestinians they will they will rebuild, they will they will re-strategize, and then they will repeat. For those of you that understand, you understand exactly what I just said. For those of you that don't, I am very sorry. But this situation will not go away. This situation will not die down. If the situation becomes quiet, it will only be a quiet before another storm. And that's just an absolute fact. You cannot do as much as you've done within the last 3 to 4 months. You cannot do what you've done in the last year and think that there's not, or think that there is, reconciliation.
And historically on this Zionist entity and the future of the conflict in this region. This operation has lifted the lid and uncovered many facts. However, speaking of the repercussions, the glorious repercussions and effects of this glorious operation requires hours, if not days. However, what's more important, it has exposed the frailty, weakness, and total fragility of Israel, more frail than a spider's web. I have read some reports on the Israeli media that the Israelis themselves have come now to believe, have come to believe more than someone, meaning myself. The Israelis have come to believe that Israel is more frail than a spider's web. This fact was established and cemented by Al-Aqsa Typhoon operation. The United States administration, represented in their president, ministers, state secretaries, and even top brass, to support this shaking entity in order to get some breathe, get back on its feet again, and to restore some action and to take the initiative, which he has until now. And they had it to provide all forms of protection and support. The swift response by the United States to support and back Israel has proven how failing Israel is. From the very first days of Al-Aqsa Typhoon operation against the totally besieged Gaza Strip, the Israeli government was in a dire need for the U.S. fleets to navigate to the Mediterranean for military and psychological support. Where is your fleet? Where is your warplanes? Where is the invincible army of Israel, the mightiest in the region? Where is all that?
Yeah, where's your mighty army? Where's your mighty military? Where's your troops at? Why all this military aid gotta come from so many different places? Why you gotta call on America? Why do you have to call on so many other nations to come help you and assist you? Like, what's going on? Don't you ain't your military so mighty and so y'all so strong and y'all so capable? Then where's everything at? Why is everything coming from across the world? Why is all your help coming from outside of your country if you're so mighty and so strong? But he just made a statement about Israel's defenses, Israel's military, Israel's country being as weak and as frail as a spider's web.
The United States hurriedly dispatched warplane carriers and other pieces of their naval fleet. The U.S. top brass generals, military experts running to the area to open the strategic weapon depots for the Israelis. From the very first days, Israel demanded new weapons, new missiles from the United States. From the very first day, Israel demanded $10 billion. Is it a strong state? Is it an invincible army, as claimed? A state that requires that amount of US and Western support? Heads of state, heads of governments, defense ministers, top brass generals flocking from all over the world to provide moral support. This is what Al Aqsa Typhoon has caused to this frail entity. These are some of the profound impacts of Al Aqsa Typhoon operation. All these must be evaluated and analyzed in detail, which we don't have time to. Yet, we must understand that all the sacrifices offered in Gaza, West Bank, and at all fronts are really worthy. All these sacrifices, all these achievements, outcomes, and repercussions deserve all these sacrifices simply for the reason that it paved a way for a new slate in our conflict with the Israeli enemy. It paved the way for many countries and nations within the region. There was and there is no other option. The other option is silence, waiting for more oppression, more siege, more death, more killing. This was the other option. That's why we can say that the decision was wise, brave, prudent, and worthy of all these sacrifices. The next point: how was the enemy's response to Al Aqsa Typhoon operation? From the very first hours, it was clear that the enemy was lost, stray. You know, it's a Sabbath day, and this was a perfect timing by the commander of Al Qassam. It seemed that they have had a long night, drunkards, not only in Gaza envelope, but also Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It took them hours to come out. They came out in hysterical state, angry, in an insane fashion. That's why when they had it to recapture the settlement within Gaza envelope, they perpetrated massacres against the Israeli settlers, not Hamas. Now we start to hear and read reports and investigations providing evidence that it was the Israelis who perpetrated the killing among the Israeli settlers. And in the near future, when the dust settles, the whole world.
And this points to the tactics. And let me point out something that I keep saying on this channel. I believe that the United States of America and its allies, as it relates to war and strategy, I believe that they have regimes under their watch, regimes that they have created that are of terroristic nature. So, as I said before, and as he is very well saying in this statement, it was found out that the Israelis were attacking their own people. You understand that? The Israelis were making it seem like it was Hamas or it was some Arab group or some part of Palestine or some militia group from said region, when in fact it was really the Israeli military. And so this is a tactic, and these are things that are learned. These are things that are practiced and learned from um, military to military. These are things that are passed on. How do we create situations where uh, a region or a nation or a country needs us? Well, we can just create problems. Well, how do we create those problems? Well, we create a terrorist group, we create a terrorist cell, and we go into said nation or said country and we start terrorizing. We start blowing things up and start killing people, killing innocent civilians, damaging the infrastructure. You start doing these things, and then that nation or that country will have to um, call on other nations and countries for help. And you might very well have that country in a position where it absolutely needs your help when it did not need your help before. And so you've created that situation so that country would then need your help. And then you come in and you stage some military operations, some military campaigns, and then you fake like you pushing, or you you pushing the terrorists back, or you're holding the terrorists back, and then after a period of time they'll just go away, and you'll get the credit for have helping said nation with their terrorist situation, their terrorist problem, their whatever problem it is that you've created, and now they have because of your creation. So these are tactics, and I keep pointing them out because they're so easily recognizable at this point. At this point, they're easily recognizable. In the past, because of how in the dark we've been kept as it relates to information, because of how in the dark we've been kept, these things were not visible. You couldn't see them. You didn't know where these problems, they told you that this person was evil, or that nation was evil, or that country is evil, and you believed it. I believed it. We all believed it. And you know, we all praised, American soldiers that went off and fought for things that we believed in, or things that we felt like we were right on, only to find out that not only were we wrong, but it was a complete lie to begin with.
would come to know that all those killed within Gaza envelope were killed by the Israeli army itself, who was acting insanely. In the wake of this big seismic event, it seems that the successive government of Israel do not learn the lesson. Unlike we always hear that Israel is learning the lesson, here they are. They never learn from past lessons or experiences, especially their experiment or experience with their wars against resistance factions in Lebanon and Palestine. What is taking place today took place in the past with some differences. In July 2006, in the successive wars with Gaza, at a different scale and different levels. Among the gravest mistakes committed by the enemy in the past, and it is taking place now, is setting high goals that they cannot achieve. Setting.
So he is referring back to a previous time in 2006, where there was another conflict, well, a previous conflict between Palestine and Israel. And what he's basically saying is that Israel, the enemy, always sets high high goals for itself, high standards for itself, meaning at the beginning of this conflict, this new conflict, they said that they were totally and completely going to annihilate Hamas. But this is an impossible feat. This is an impossible task. How can you do such a thing when all you're doing in the present time is creating more Hamas freedom fighters? You're creating them by killing innocent civilians. And you continue and you continue and you continue. And so when I say you're creating Hamas freedom fighters, well, what do you think will happen? There's some journalists, just people that report the news, more than half their families killed. Some journalists, 11 members of their families killed. And these are Al Jazeera's journalists killed by the Israeli military, by the Israeli government, because of their military campaign and how they're conducting their military campaign. See, it wouldn't be just about conducting a military campaign, because if you had troops on the ground, then many of us who are intelligent thinking individuals feel as though the casualty rate will be much less. But the problem with that is that there would be more dead Israeli soldiers. And that's what you cannot stand for. That's what you cannot tolerate, because you're so scared and you're so petrified. So you won't go face your enemy hand to hand combat. You will sit back and you will send drones and you will send bombs. And you will just look at the situation and assess the situation, and you'll say that these people should have left. They shouldn't have been there. They're supporting Hamas. You will use every excuse under the sun to justify your actions.
High goals they cannot reach. They set as top goal to annihilate Hamas, the whole of Hamas. Then, speaking of toppling the government of Hamas, then eliminating the leaders of Hamas, then the military wing of Hamas. Now they are claiming to have as the top goal to annihilate Hamas. And when they started to wake up, they now speak about another goal, to bring home the captives. Those who have had a long experience with different resistance factions in Palestine and Lebanon throughout history, have you seen at any point of time, the Israelis capable of releasing their captives without negotiations? Never. What happened in Lebanon 2006? They declared as the goal is to annihilate, to wipe out Hezbollah. They were backed by the United States and the whole West, including Arab states. Their goal at that time was to wipe out Hezbollah from Lebanon and to bring home the two Israeli captives. The war extended for 33 days. Neither Hezbollah was wiped out, nor their two captives released without negotiations. The same thing is taking place today in Gaza, yet with a difference, and the difference is the massive pogrom, the massive amount of destructions and killing. In July war, 1,150 houses leveled, thousands of fallen martyrs. Yet, the resistance fighters at all fronts, backed by the Lebanese people, stood their ground. The enemy, step by step, gave up on his goals. What's taking place in Gaza Strip today proves the stupidity and impotency of the Israelis. They are wreaking killing among civilian Palestinians in Gaza. Most of those killed are women and children. The majority of the victims are civilians. Churches, mosques, school buildings, even hospitals are not spared. Everything is legitimized. Entire neighborhoods are wiped out. School buildings, places of worship, and the whole world is standing by watching. Does this require an invincible army? For a whole month, the Israelis failed to produce a single military achievement. And when they started the ground operation, the same scenario of July war in Lebanon, the random shelling, displacement of citizens, and the killing and the falling of thousands of martyrs could not bring the resistance to their knees. Then, at that time, the Israelis started their ground operation, and to them, our fighters stood up to them, and the whole battle was followed by the whole world. The same thing is repeated in Gaza. The Israelis are trying to launch a ground operation in order to sell to the whole world that they are launching a large-scale ground operation. Even the limited moves taken by them were met by the bravery of the Palestinian resistance. We have all watched this resistance fighter approaching and placing the explosive on the top of the tank. How do you think the Israeli troops will be able to fight among those brave fighters? Nothing but confusion, fear, and frailty. What the Israelis are good at over the past 75 years is nothing but perpetrating pogroms, massacres, with the aim of exercising pressure on the leaders of the resistance to wave the white flag. And I believe the scenes we have been witnessing every day, every hour, every minute, women, men, children crawling from underneath the rubble, crying out and saying, "We are holding our ground. We are standing tall. The end of this battle will be nothing but your defeat. By killing innocent civilians, you will not achieve anything." All what's taken place in Gaza Strip, seen by the whole world, reveals and proves once again the brutal, barbaric nature of the Zionist regime of Israel, the usurping, occupying force.
And it's the same thing over and over and over again. You know, this situation, like I said, it has reached an inflection point, and there will be no reconciliation. The only reconciliation will be in the dismantlement of the Israeli military and the Israeli government. And unless that happens, there will be no reconciliation. There will be no peace in this region. Israel will forever have a problem. It will forever have to defend itself. It is painted itself into a corner that it very well, um, it may never, it may never see light at the end of the tunnel of this corner that it's painted itself into. It may never see light. And so this speech is important because Nasrallah is the leader of Hezbollah. He's one of the chiefs of Hezbollah. And so he's given not only Hezbollah's position, but he's also making certain things clear and understood. And so this is important. It's the same thing with the Tucker Carlson exclusive interview with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. If we don't understand, or if we're not allowed to hear the reasoning, the ideology, the thoughts, the opinions of those who our Congress, our military, our government has deemed terrorists or dictators, we must hear their side. We can't just believe what the United States government says. This is emphatically impossible at this point because the United States government has failed the American people so many times. History shows a pattern of the United States lying to its citizens over and over and over again. From everything from war to pandemics to police racism, brutality, just you name it. We've been lied to in every aspect of being lied to. We've even been lied to about the weather. I mean, God, for God's sake, we've even been lied to about the weather. And so it's, like I said, it's at a point where you have to begin to allow other people to speak, to allow yourself to receive and be receptive to information outside of the construct that you're in. We're in a construct called the United States of America. In this construct, the news media outlets have propagated information to us that have more times than not been untrue. So, what do you do with that? As an intellectual individual, you have to go outside. You have to go to outside sources to receive information, to receive different viewpoints and different opinions. And so this is the reason why I cover stories like this. This is the reason why I bring the speeches of individuals as such to you. The United States news media outlet will never play this broadcast in its entirety on the news. They would never do such a thing because they've deemed this individual a terrorist. They've deemed him um, an adversary to the United States of America, and so they would never do such a thing. They don't even want you to hear what he has to say. Same thing with the Tucker Carlson exclusive interview that he did with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. There's so many people that do not want you to hear that interview, did not want that interview to happen, did not want you to hear what the Russian president has to say. So many people have downplayed the interview. So many people have said all types of things. He took Tucker Carlson on a history lesson. He ran over Tucker Carlson. He didn't let. It's just so many different negative connotations that came out since the interview has um has been made public. It's ridiculous. Instead of actually listening to what's being said, instead of actually listening to the viewpoint, instead of actually listening to the opinion and the argument of the president of Russia. So it's the same thing in this situation right here. Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah, has released a statement. And he's released statements before and I've put them up. But this statement is important above all other statements because it is of a present mind frame. It is of now. And it gives you a trajectory of where we're headed from this point forward. And so this is on Al Jazeera English channel on the YouTube platform. I suggest that many of you go check this interview, well, not this interview, but this speech out and listen to it in its entirety and understand exactly what the supreme leader is speaking about, exactly what he's saying, because only then you'll begin to understand how problematic allowing the government of the United States of America and its military industrial complex to just do as they please. And this is what we, the American people, we can be charged with this. We can be charged with being complicit in this. And I am not complicit in any of this. I did not sanction, allow, vote for any of it. And no one asked. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother discussion. But I just wanted to bring this speech to you guys to give you guys some context to exactly the feelings, the sentiment, the opinions, the views of those that we are being told are evil, are terrorists. Follow Street Icon on all social media platforms. That's at Street Icon 8080 on the YouTube platform, at Street Icon 8080 on the YouTube platform, at Street Icon 1 on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. Street Icon on all social media platforms. Drop a comment in the comment section and let me know how you feel about this. Did you know about these stories? How specifically and exactly do they make you feel? Drop a comment in the comment section and always remember, stay vigilant, stay safe. Peace.